Good afternoon everybody and welcome to the stream. I hope you're all well. I'm Robert from the El Magnifico Games channel, and today we are going to continue with our normal Wednesday poetry and riddles. There we go. That's been corrected. So last week we finished off on Man by Sir John Davies. So as usual, that's where we'll begin this week. Now, who was Sir John Davies? He was this chap. An English poet, lawyer and politician who sat in the House of Commons at various times between 1597 and 1621. He became Attorney General for Ireland and formulated many of the legal principles that underpinned the British Empire. Oh, Jenny says, I saw flower languages. They appear to be interesting indeed. Yes, historically flowers had a symbolic meaning, or that is to say, every well-known flower would have had some connotations with it. And I keep this document open and ready just in case when we're reading poetry, or indeed as we were going through various prose in the past, we might come across a flower and wonder what the author was trying to indicate. So that's why I have this here. Where was I? Yes. John Davies. So that's who he was. So, I will continue with a reading of his poem Man, and then we will move on to some poetry that we haven't seen yet. So, Man. I know my soul hath power to know all things, yet she is blind and ignorant in all. I know I'm one of nature's little kings, yet to the least and the vilest things am thrall. I know my life's a pain and but a span. I know my senses mocked in everything. And, to conclude, I know myself a man, which is a proud and yet a wretched thing. Which was an interesting little poem, thought-provoking in its way. And we move on to at least one poem by Sir Robert Ayton. Yes, looks like we have two poems by him. So, who was Sir Robert Ayton? I was just about to say they seem to have spelt it differently, but Wikipedia itself indicates that there are two possible spellings. He was a Scottish poet. Ayton was the son of Andrew Ayton of Kinaldy Castle in Fife, Scotland, and Mary Lundy. Iton and his elder brother John entered St Leonard's College in St Andrews in 1584. After graduating MA from St Andrews in 1588, he studied civil law at Paris. He appears to have been well known to his literary contemporaries in Scotland and England. He became a groom in the Privy Chamber of King James in succession to Lawrence Marbury, was knighted and became a gentleman of the bedchamber in 1612. I believe that is actually a reasonably senior position. I can't be 100% sure, but that's what I would expect. He became secretary to Anne of Denmark in succession to another Scottish poet, William Fowler, who was sent as ambassador to Rudolph II, Holy Roman Emperor, in 1609. He was later secretary to Henrietta Maria. He wrote poems in Latin, Greek and English, and was one of the first Scots to write in Standard English. His major work was Diaphanatus and Charidora, which I may well be mispronouncing. That's of Greek origin, which it seems like. I would have thought Charidora is probably more likely, but I can't be 100% sure as I don't speak Greek. Inconstancy Upbraided is perhaps the best of his short poems. He is credited with a little poem, Auld Lang Syne, which probably suggested Robert Burns' famous Auld Lang Syne. Yes, that would have been much later, because Robert Burns was one of the original Romantic poets. So off the top of my head, Robert Burns would have been, what, 1780s onwards? Is that right? Yes, looks that way. Around then, anyway. Anyway, where were we? Iton died at Whitehall Palace and is buried in the South Ambulatory area of in Westminster Abbey. I think that's probably supposed to be of or in. The monument includes a bronze bust attributed variously to either Hubert Le Sueur or Francesco Fanelli. Amongst his bequests, Iton gave a diamond hatband to William Murray and his French bed to Jane Horwood. Oh dear. That's an unfortunate name, isn't it? Diamond hatband. I assume that means diamonds have been attached to the hatband, since clearly you couldn't have a hatband made out of diamond. Diamond encrusted. Bothwell and Little Jock Elliot. He is also the author of a ballad called Bothwell about the battle fought by James Hepburn, 4th Earl of Bothwell, with the border reiver John Elliot of Park, also known as Little Jock Elliot or Little Jock of the Park. The ballad recounts how Bothwell, in attempting to arrest Little Jock Elliot, suffers life-threatening wounds, though he ends by slaying his foe. I would say that is a very ripe story for poetry, then. The triumph of, I assume, this would be good versus evil, but then taking a mortal wound in the process, so hence the bittersweetness of that, and the ample opportunity to meditate on death. Iton was 8 years old at the time Bothwell perished in a dungeon in Denmark, and hence must have heard about the attempted arrest of Elliot by people familiar with the story, particularly as Bothwell was a figure of national renown. The border ballad Little Jock Elliot celebrates, among other events, the achievement of Little Jock Elliot on this occasion, and has the refrain, "My name is Little Jock Elliot, and wha da meddle wi' me?" This later ballad of indeterminate age also implicitly states that little Jock Elliot survived the encounter with Bothwell. This is interesting. So the ballad recounts how Bothwell, in attempting to arrest little Jock Elliot, suffers life-threatening wounds, though he ends by slaying his foe. And then further on it says, it also implicitly states that little Jock Elliot survived the encounter with Bothwell. Does that not seem like a contradiction? Certainly challenges the idea I had that this was a ballad about good versus evil. I don't know what degree they went in for that sort of thing. I know in Western culture a lot of this goodies and baddies tropes that permeate our media come from regulations imposed in Hollywood in the early years, where various Christian groups felt that it would be wrong to portray a baddie winning or any obscene content of various categories, etc. And so for a long time Hollywood was very well regulated to make sure that the films being produced conformed to the standards of these Christian groups. I don't know the great details about it, but that's actually, so I've heard, where this idea about the good guys always win, and indeed the general dichotomy of good versus evil, became massively popularised. Because of course, many people, myself included, do appreciate a more realistic touch where there's moral ambiguity. But that would have been seen as unacceptable in... when would this have been? This is just off the top of my head, but I would guess it was probably around 1930s America onwards. Could be wrong. Anyway. My point being, at this period in history, I don't know to what degree they would have gone in for the whole good versus evil stuff, as I initially suggested this poem might have been about. Having read this, it sounds like it may have been more of a underdog affair, but you never know. Anywho, I think that's in far more detail than we need a description of who Sir Robert Eiton was. Hold on. Sir Robert Eiton. Was he knighted before King James became King James I of England? Which would mean that he was a knight of whatever Scottish orders of chivalry there are. See, I've never actually looked this up. I don't know if Scotland has its own orders of chivalry or not. I mean, logically you'd think it would. But then again, they would have been united with... in a sense they would have been united since the Stuart times. That's not to say that were they to exist, there wouldn't be a degree to which they're kept deliberately separate, but presumably they'd be awarded under the same body, you would assume. I don't know. Well, let's have a look at the dates. So it says he became a groom in the Privy Chamber of King James in succession to Lawrence Marbury, was knighted and became a gentleman of the bedchamber in 1612. Right. When did King James ascend to the English throne? 1603. Okay, so the nations were united at that point, or at least there was, what do they call it? Personal union. That's right. Was personal union in a real union? Okay. That's right. Real union didn't happen till quite a lot later, did it? I don't know when. Off the top of my head, I don't remember when Scotland and England underwent real union. I should remember. I know leading up to the Civil War there was a lot of religious unrest, and not all of it, but quite a lot of it centred on differences between how the English were doing things and how the Scottish were doing things. But perhaps that's not a very good indicator of whether there had been real union by that point or not. Right. Until the Acts of Union of 1707. So that's quite late, during the reign of the last Stuart monarch, Anne. Queen Anne. Ah, okay. So that would have been shortly before Georgian times then. Were they the Hanovers? Is that right? Who would succeed her? George I. Yes, from the electorate of Hanover. That's correct then. So that would have been obviously well past the Glorious Revolution and so on that Queen Anne took over. Okay, that puts things... I suppose this doesn't have much bearing on the poetry we're going to read today, but that at least puts the history in clearer focus in my head. Never got to the bottom of to what degree Scotland had its own chivalric orders, which I imagine it would have done, and to what degree they were united, and if so, at what point, and how separate they are today, if they are indeed separate. I find it hard to believe, not impossible, but hard to believe that that somebody in Scotland would have the authority to make someone a knight outside of all of the machinery that exists to have people recommended and then ultimately approved for knighthood in England. It's not impossible, but that would surprise me a lot, and I think it would probably be well known if that were the case. So I would suggest that if there were two separate if the English and Scottish thrones had parallel systems of chivalric orders, and they didn't combine when James the First of England, 6th of Scotland, took the throne of England. And by combine, I don't necessarily mean that they would have necessarily done away with any of the orders. They may have just taken them both as a what's the name of it when you combine two sets of things? They may have just taken the union of all chivalric orders, if Scotland had its own, but then administered them all together. If that hadn't happened at the point when King James took the throne, then that presumably would have happened at the point of the Act of Union in 1707 is my complete speculation. Could be wrong. Anyway, as much as I'd like to research that and not just leave it as my idle ramblings, we're here to look at poetry, not to discuss history in the abstract. So perhaps I should get on with that. So, Sir Robert Eiton to his forsaken mistress. I do confess thou art smooth and fair, and I might have gone near to love thee, had I not found the slightest prayer that lips could move had power to move thee. But I can let thee now alone, as worthy to be loved by none. I do confess thou art sweet, yet find thee such an unthrift of thy sweets. Thy favours are but like the wind, that kisseth everything it meets. And since thou canst with more than one, thou art worthy to be kissed by none. The morning rose that untouched stands, armed with her briars, how sweet she smells, but plucked and stained through ruder hands, her sweets no longer with her dwell, but scent and beauty both are gone, and leaves fall from her one by one. Such fate ere long will thee betide, when thou hast handled been a while, with their flowers to be thrown aside, and I shall sigh, while some will smile, to see thy love to every one have brought thee to be loved by none. So this seems to be, as a work of poetry, a condemnation of being polyamorous, although it's not entirely clear how familiar this forsaken mistress has been with other people exactly. So, let's go through it line by line. I do confess thou art smooth and fair, and I might have gone near to love thee. Interesting, I make both of those... Hold on. Let me read the first line again. I do confess that smooth and fair. Right, that's iambic tetrameter. And I might have gone near to love thee. So I think that's iambic tetrameter with feminine ending. Had I not found the slightest prayer. Again, that's iambic tetrameter with a feminine ending. That lips could move had power to move thee. And again, but I can let thee now alone. Iambic tetrameter with a masculine ending, as worthy to be loved by none. This seems odd to me. As worthy to be loved... No, that works. As worthy to be loved by none. And quickly, let's look at the rhyming structure. We've got fair and prayer, thee and thee, which is that royal rhyme where a word rhymes with itself? No, rhyme royal, or is that something else? It's been a while. Just a moment. I want to look this up. I might be out of luck there. Oh, right, okay. Just a second. I'm seeing a lot of references to rich rhyme, but that's slightly different. I think that's for homonyms mostly, and homophones. Hold on, I'll just look it up online, that'll be quicker. No, rhyme royal is a form of poetic structure. So something entirely different. So I suppose I was just thinking of rich rhyme. Although I did think there was a specific term for when you rhyme a word with itself. Anyway, rhyming scheme. A B A B C C. Which probably has a specific name, but off the top of my head I can't remember what that is. And it's written in iambic tetrameter, so that's form and... So that's the rhyme and rhythm discussed. As for meaning, the first stanza didn't seem too difficult. It begins with praise for the subject of the poem, and then goes on to introduce the concept that they aren't worthy to be loved, which is an interesting thing to say in a poem, since a lot of poetry seems to be about love itself, whereas this seems somewhat the antithesis of that. I do confess thou art sweet, yet find thee such an unthrift of thy sweets. Okay, unthrift. Someone that's thrift is generally someone, you think of someone who is, who doesn't like spending money. It's almost equivalent to being a skinflint. But where it says yet find thee such an unthrift of thy sweets, I think it's not getting at not so much unwillingness to give something away. Well, yeah, it says unthrift, so it would be the opposite. It's being overly generous, not managing one's resources, with how would you say, with sufficient care, allowing oneself to carelessly give away things, or give away things in excess. So of those sweets is presumably the whatever the either the nicer attributes of the subject of the poem, or more likely acts of romantic favour. Thy favours are but like the wind that kisseth everything it meets, and since thou canst with more than one, so since one it says cannot or canst, but I suppose what it really means is should not with more than one, without actually specifying what the thing is. Thou art worthy to be kissed by none. So it's basically saying, woman, you are too loose. I think is essentially the gist. The morning rose that untouched stands, armed with her briars, how sweet she smells, but plucked and strained through ruder hands, a sweet no longer with her dwells, but scent and beauty both are gone, and leaves fall from her one by one. Plucked makes sense, that's removing the thorns, presumably. I'm not sure what they mean by strained. I understand that fundamentally the imagery here is one of processing a rose such that what remains is, or processing a rose plant such that what remains is no longer appealing. But I don't see a specific reference here to removing the flower, unless that's what they mean by strained. I would assume not. What do we get if we look up strain? Race, lineage, pedigree, not in that sense. This is the noun, we're looking for the verb. To hold tightly, to clasp. So perhaps just being too rough with the plant, to apply force or forces by stretching out, to damage by drawing, stretching, or the exertion of force, to act upon in any way so as to cause change of form or volume, as when bending a beam, to exert or struggle to do something, especially to stretch one's senses faculties beyond what is normal or comfortable, to stretch beyond its proper limit, to do violence to in terms of intent or meaning, to separate solid from liquid by passing through a strainer or colander, to percolate, to be filtered, to make uneasy or natural, to produce what apparent effort, to force, to constrain, to urge with importunity, to press, hug somebody, to hold somebody tightly. I see. Yeah, so again, I'd say this is still a bit ambiguous about what's actually been done to the plant, but it sounds like the suggestion here is that if you're overly rough with, just as if you're overly rough with a rose, it will lose its finer qualities. The suggestion here is that's equivalent to the subject of this poem being overly loose, and that she too loses her finer qualities. I do notice here it says about ruder hands, which I assume is a reference to the lower classes, which is notable, or at least that of a less cultured individual. If we look up rude as an adjective, lacking in refinement or civility, bad-mannered, discourteous. Such fate ere long will thee betide, when thou hast handled been a while. When thou hast handled been a while. So when you've been handled a while. So it's again calling back to this imagery of the rose being damaged by rough treatment, but they're using handled here as a euphemism, obviously, for other things. With sere flowers to be thrown aside, and I shall sigh while some will smile, to see thy love to every one, brought thee to be loved by none. I suppose there is one possible, more charitable interpretation of this poetry, that it could be a warning against spreading one's love too thin, but I don't think that's what it's saying. I think it's trying to admonish promiscuity. Anyway, so we move on to a poem entitled To an Inconstant One. So, to an inconstant one. I loved thee once, I'll love thee no more. Thine be the grief as is the blame. Thou art not what thou wast before. What reason I should be the same? He that can love unloved again hath better store of love than brain. God send me love my debts to pay, while unthrifts fool their love away. Nothing could have my love o'erthrown, if thou hadst still continued mine. Yea, if thou hadst remained thy own, I might perchance have yet been thine. But thou thy freedom didst recall, that it thou might elsewhere enthrall. And then how could I but disdain a captive's captive to remain? When new desires had unconquered thee, and changed the object of thy will, it had been lethargy in me, not constancy, to love thee still. Yea, it had been a sin to go, and prostitute affection so, since we are taught no prayers to say, to such as must to others pray. Yet do thou glory in thy choice of his good fortune boast. I'll neither grieve, nor yet rejoice, to see him gain what I have lost. The height of my disdain shall be, to laugh at him, to blush for thee, to love thee still, but go no more, a begging to a beggar's door. So this seems to be a poem in very much the same vein. It suggests that the subject of the poem has found another lover, and it's not clear whether there had been an explicit breakup and they then found someone else, or if they were just dating multiple people at the same time, and then when one of them found out, this was their reaction. But yes, it also looks to me to be an admonishment of promiscuity. Also looks like iambic tetrameter to me. Looks like ABABCCDD. Yep, that's the rhyming scheme. And we've discussed the meaning. Another reference to unthrift, while unthrifts fool their love away, which is an interesting turn of phrase. I particularly found it poignant where the poem concluded a begging at a beggar's door. That was interesting, because aside from just being an admonishment of promiscuity, it seems as though it sheds some more light on the situation being described, that we may in fact be dealing with some sort of love triangle or something like that. Still, let's keep going. So we move on to a poem by Ben Jonson. Looks like we have a few from Ben Jonson. Quite a few, actually. Okie doke. Let's find out who Ben Jonson was then, shall we? Benjamin Jonson, the 11th of June 1572 to the 16th of August 1637, was an English playwright and poet. Jonson's artistry exerted a lasting influence upon English poetry and stage comedy. He popularised the comedy of humours. He is best known for the satirical plays Every Man in His Humour, Volpone, or The Fox, The Alchemist, and Bartholomew Fair, and for his lyric and epigrammatic poetry. He is generally regarded as the second most important English dramatist after William Shakespeare during the reign of James I. Jonson was a classically educated, well-read and cultured man of the English Renaissance, with an appetite for controversy, personal and political, artistic and intellectual, whose cultural influence was of unparalleled breadth upon the playwrights and the poets of the Jacobean era and of the Caroline era. I do notice they say the English Renaissance, but these dates seem quite late for the Renaissance period in general. I don't know if England itself is considered as having a Renaissance that occurred much later. The English Renaissance was a cultural and artistic movement in England from the early 16th century to the early 17th century. Yeah, that is quite late. I wonder if that is supposed to be when the Renaissance took place in England, or more likely, it is a separate series of cultural changes that happened to take place a few hundred years after the Renaissance in Europe and was just given a similar name. Anyway, where were we? So, in midlife, Johnson said his paternal grandfather, who served King Henry VIII and was a gentleman, was a member of the extended Johnson family of Annandale in the Dumfries and Galloway, a genealogy that is attested by the 3 spindles in the Johnson family coat of arms. One spindle is a diamond-shaped heraldic device used by the Johnson family. His ancestors spelled the family name with a letter T, John Stone or John Stown. While the spelling had eventually changed to the more common Johnson, the playwright's own particular preference became Johnson, which is a simplification further. Johnson's father lost his property, was imprisoned, and, as a Protestant, suffered forfeiture under Queen Mary. Becoming a clergyman upon his release, he died a month before his son's birth. His widow married a master bricklayer 2 years later. Johnson attended school in St. Martin's Lane in London. Later, a family friend paid for his studies at Westminster School, where the antiquarian, historian, topographer and officer of arms William Camden was one of his masters. The pupil and master became friends, and the intellectual influence of Camden's broad-ranging scholarship upon Johnson's art and literary style remained notable until Camden's death in 1623. So presumably at that point, the influence stopped, which is interesting, because it doesn't say personal influence, it says intellectual influence. You would assume that an intellectual influence could last past one's death still. On leaving Westminster School in 1589, Johnson was to have attended the University of Cambridge to continue his book learning, but did not, because of his unwilled apprenticeship to his bricklayer stepfather. According to the churchman and historian Thomas Fuller, Johnson at this time built a garden wall in Lincoln's Inn. After having been an apprentice bricklayer, Johnson went to the Netherlands and volunteered to soldier with the English regiments of Sir Francis Vere in Flanders. England was allied with the Dutch in their fight for independence, as well as the ongoing war for Spain. Interesting. I didn't know about that. 80 Years' War or Dutch Revolt was an armed conflict in the Habsburg Netherlands between disparate groups of rebels and the Spanish government. The Hawthornden manuscripts of the conversations between Ben Jonson and the poet William Drummond of Hawthornden report that, when in Flanders, Johnson engaged, fought and killed an enemy soldier in single combat and took for trophies the weapons of the vanquished soldier. After his military activity on the continent, Johnson returned to England and worked as an actor and as a playwright. As an actor, he was the protagonist Geronimo in the play The Spanish Tragedy by Thomas Kyde, the first revenge tragedy in English literature. What's a revenge tragedy? Revenge tragedy is a theoretical genre in which the principal theme is revenge and revenge's fatal consequences. Makes sense. By 1597, he was a working playwright employed by Philip Henslowe, the leading producer for the English public theatre. By the next year, the production of Every Man in His Humour had established Jonson's reputation as a dramatist. Jonson described his wife to William Drummond as a shrewd yet honest. The identity of Jonson's wife is obscure, though she sometimes is identified as Anne Lewis, the woman who married a Benjamin Jonson in 1594 at the church of St. Magnus the Martyr near London Bridge. The registers of St. Martin in Fields record that Mary Jonson, their eldest daughter, died in November 93 at 6 months of age. A decade later, in 1603, Benjamin Jonson, their eldest son, died of bubonic plague when he was 7 years old. Oh dear. Upon which Jonson wrote the elegiac On My First Son. The second son, also named Benjamin Jonson, died in 1635. During that period, Jonson and his wife lived separate lives for 5 years. Jonson enjoyed the residential hospitality of his patrons, Esme Stuart, 3rd Duke of Lennox and 7th Seigneur de Albany, and Sir Robert Townsend. That reminds me, what is a comedy of humours? The comedy of humours is a genre of dramatic comedy that focuses on character or range of characters, each of whom exhibits 2 or more overriding traits of humours that dominates their personality, desires and conduct. Let's see. So presumably the comedy comes from the fact that the characters are exaggerated caricatures of real life people. Yeah, I'm sure this is very interesting, but I'm not sure I want to read the entire Wikipedia article. We'll read at least the next section, I think. By summer 1597, Jonson had a fixed engagement in the Admiral's Men, then performing under Philip Henslowe's management at the Rose. John Aubrey reports on certain authority that Jonson was not successful as an actor. Whatever his skills as an actor, he was evidently more valuable to the company as a writer. By this time, Jonson had begun to write original plays for the Admiral's Men. In 1598, he was mentioned by Francis Meres in his Paladis Tamia as one of the best for tragedy. None of his early tragedies survive, however. An undated comedy, The Case is Altered, may be his earliest surviving play. In 1597, a play which he co-wrote with Thomas Nash, The Isle of Dogs, was suppressed after causing great offence. Arrest warrants for Jonson and Nash were issued by Queen Elizabeth I's so-called interrogator, Richard Topcliffe. Jonson was jailed in Marshalsea Prison and charged with lewd and mutinous behaviour, while Nash managed to escape to Great Yarmouth. How is that an escape? That wasn't a meant as to be disrespectful to Great Yarmouth. I mean, Great Yarmouth is in England. I don't see how you would escape English justice by going to somewhere within England. 2 of the actors, Gabriel Spencer and Robert Shaw, were also imprisoned. A year later, Jonson was again briefly imprisoned, this time in Newgate Prison, for killing Gabriel Spencer in a duel on the 22nd of September 1598 in Hogston Fields. That's interesting. Oh, today part of Foxton. Why was he imprisoned for that? Because I thought this was a period before dueling was outlawed. Admittedly, it doesn't say he was tried. It just says that he was briefly imprisoned. That could be before an investigation took place to ensure that this wasn't just murder as opposed to a duel, maybe. Or perhaps there was a period before duels were acceptable and then they went into fashion and went back out. Or perhaps they never were actually legal, just accepted. I'm not sure. Tried on a charge of manslaughter, Johnson pleaded guilty but was released by benefit of clergy, a legal ploy through which he gained leniency by reciting a brief Bible verse, the neck verse, forfeiting his goods and chattels and being branded with the so-called Tyburn T on his left thumb. In English law, the benefit of clergy was originally a provision by which clergymen accused of a crime could claim that they were outside the jurisdiction of the secular courts and be tried instead in an ecclesiastical court under canon law. Interesting. Okay, so he managed to get out of a secular court into an ecclesiastical court and then read from the Bible in such a way that he was given a lenient punishment. While in jail, Johnson converted to Catholicism, possibly through the influence of fellow prisoner Father Thomas Wright, a Jesuit priest. Oh, that's surprising, given that his grandfather suffered because he was specifically Protestant in a Catholic England. In 1598, Johnson produced his first great success, Every Man in His Humour, capitalising on the vogue for the humorous plays which George Chapman had begun with A Humorous Day's Mirth. William Shakespeare was among the first actors to be cast. Johnson followed this in 1599 with Every Man Out of His Humour, a pedantic attempt to imitate Aristophanes. It is not known whether this was a success on stage, but when published it proved popular and went through several editions. Really? So William Shakespeare was an actor originally? I mean, I suppose that makes sense. I suppose that's how you'd work your way up. Johnson's other work for the theatre in the last years of Elizabeth I's reign was marked by fighting and controversy. Cynthia's Revels was produced by the Children of the Chapel. Produced by the Children of the Chapel Royal at Blackfriars Theatre in 1600. It satirised both John Marston, who Johnson believed had accused him of lustfulness in Histriomastics, and Thomas Dekker. Johnson attacked the two poets again in Poetaster. Dekker responded with Satyromastics, subtitled The Untrussing of the Humorous Poet. The final scene of this play, while certainly not to be taken at face value as a portrait of Johnson, offers a caricature that is recognisable from Drummond's report, boasting about himself and condemning other poets, criticising performances of his plays and calling attention to himself in any available way. This war of the theatres appears to have ended with reconciliation on all sides. Johnson collaborated with Dekker on a pageant welcoming James I to England in 1603, although Drummond reports that Johnson called Dekker a rogue. Marston dedicated The Malcontent to Johnson, and the two collaborated with Chapman on Eastward Ho, a 1605 play whose anti-Scottish sentiments briefly landed both Johnson and Chapman in jail. Oh dear. I think we'll stop there, reading through that Wikipedia article. But hopefully that gives us some sense of who he was, and also certain events in his life to look out for allusions to. So, Hymn to Diana. Diana, of course, being the Roman goddess of the hunt. The Roman equivalent of Artemis, I believe. Let me double check I'm right. Uh... She is equated with the Greek goddess Artemis. So yes. Hymn to Diana. Queen and huntress, chaste and fair, now the sun is laid to sleep, seated in thy silver chair, state in wonted manner keep. Hesperus entreats thy light, goddess excellently bright. Earth, let not thy envious shade dare itself to interpose. Cynthia's shining orb was made, heaven to clear when day did close. Bless us then with wished sight, goddess excellently bright. Lay thy bow of pearl apart, and thy crystal shining quiver, give unto the flying heart space to breathe, how short soever. Thou that makest the day of night, goddess excellently bright. Interesting. So what was that about? Well, as always, let's begin with, well, I say as always, as I often do, let's begin with rhythm and rhyme, since those are easier to assess. What do we have? A, B, A, B, C, C. That seems consistent, so it's the rhyming scheme. Looks like it's an trochaic tetrameter with a masculine ending. Yep, that appears to be the case, which is an interesting meter. Beginning and ending on a strong beat. Actually, that doesn't work throughout, does it? It works for queen and huntress, chaste and fair, but it doesn't work for earth, let not thy envious shade. That should obviously be envious shade. So that implies that a strong beat should fall on thy envious shade. But then there's going to be a strong beat on earth, I'm sure. So I guess we let not are both unstressed, which breaks the scansion a bit, but that's what it says. Dare itself to interpose. That works. Right, who's Cynthia? Is this a mythological figure we should be aware of? Cynthia is a feminine given name of Greek origin, from Mount Cynthus on Delos. The name has been in use in the Anglosphere since the 1600s. That would make this an early example if... Well, I suppose what they mean is it's a name that they would... a given name that they would give children. So the fact that there's a reference to it in this poem doesn't mean that they would name their children that, necessarily. But it is notable that around the time this poem would have been written is around the time this name would have been introduced. There are various spellings for this name, and it could be abbreviated to Cindy, 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 or occasionally to Thea or Thea. Cynthia was originally an epithet of the Greek goddess Artemis, who according to legend was born on Mount Cynthus, Selene, the Greek personification of the moon, and the Roman Diana were also sometimes called Cynthia. Oh, well there you go. So, Cynthia's shining orb was made, heaven to clear, and day did close. Bless us then with wished sight, goddess excellently bright. Lie thy bow of pearl apart, and thy crystal shining quiver, give unto the flying heart space to breathe, how short soever. Thou that makest the day of night, goddess excellently bright. I don't fully understand this, to be perfectly honest. Seated in thy silver chair, are they conflating Artemis, Diana, and Selene by any chance? And that this is actually a poem that is supposed to evoke imagery of the moon. Cynthia's shining orb was made, heaven to clear when day did close. Bless us then with wished sight, goddess excellently bright. It sounds like it, doesn't it? And aside from the references to chaste and fair, I'm not seeing much else going on in this poem that I would attribute to any other parallel messages. Like chaste and fair is obviously the conflation of chastity and beauty, feminine beauty, which would have been a thing back then. Who's Hesperus? In Greek mythology, Hesperus is the evening star, the planet Venus in the evening. He is one of the Astra Planeta, a son of the dawn goddess Eos, Roman Aurora. He is the half-brother of her other son, Phosphorus, also called Eosphorus, the morning star. Hesperus' Roman equivalent is Vesper, evening supper, evening star west. By one account, Hesperus' father was Cephalus, a mortal, while Phosphorus was the star god of Astraeus. Other sources, however, state that Hesperus was the brother of Atlas and thus the son of Iapetus. Again, this is more references then to the night, as well as lines like, now the sun is laid asleep. So more and more of this sounds like it is a poem about the beauty of nighttime and the moon. Interesting that they would conflate that with Diana, though. I wasn't aware of the association. I feel like at least part of this poem must be going over my head, because it just feels like there's some subtext here that I'm missing. My current understanding of the poem seems too literal. I feel like there's probably something else going on, but I can't place it. Anywho, let's keep going. To Celia. To Celia. Drink to me only with thine eyes, and I will pledge with mine, or leave a kiss but in the cup, and I'll not look for wine. The first that from the soul doth rise, doth ask a drink divine, but might I of Jove's nectar sup, I would not change for thine. I sent thee late a rosy wreath, not so much honouring thee, as giving it a hope that there it could not withered be. But thou thereon didst only breathe, and sentest it back to me, since when it grows and smells I swear, not of itself but thee. We've read this one before. I am certain that was in the 100 Best English Poems, the anthology we were reading previously. I think it's a ballad looking at it. Looks that way, isn't it? Because it's 4 foot, 3 foot, 4 foot, 3 foot. Sorry. 4 foot, 3 foot, 4 foot. I mean feet, don't I? Sorry. Let me start again. It looks like a ballad, doesn't it? Because it's 4 feet, 3 feet, 4 feet, 3 feet, over and over. Yes. Iambic as well. I can't off the top of my head remember encountering a trochaic ballad, so perhaps that just isn't a thing. As for rhyming, it's alternately rhymed, I think. No, it's every even number line rhymes. But it rhymes even... but the rhymes continue throughout each stanza. So we have mine, wine, divine, and thine. And we have thee, be, me, and thee again. Oh, there are additional rhymes. Because eyes and rise rhyme. And cup and sup rhyme. And we also have... wreath and breathe make an I rhyme. And there and swear rhyme. So they've done... That's actually one of the more complex rhyming structures I think we've encountered. So whereas the even numbered lines all rhyme within a stanza, the odd numbered lines of a stanza rhyme with the line which is 4 lines down from it, or because each stanza has exactly 8 lines, 8 verses. Another way of saying that is that they form alternate pairs, but only when counting the odd numbered lines, not the even, which is interesting. As for the meaning, I could be wrong. It seems fairly self-evident. It seems to be about unrequited love, and the speaker in the poem seems reasonably infatuated. I don't think the poem expounds principles that would be very well received today, because I think that it might be seen as unrequited love does not have a good reputation these days. It would tend to be seen as a bit stalkerish, even though there's no reference to that specific behaviour here. But I can see that throughout most of history that would have been well received, at least the sentiments. But it's very well crafted, well expressed. It's good. Certainly technically it's good. What do we have here? Simplex munditis. Munditius? Or munditis? I'm pretty sure munditis, although I don't know Um, although I assume that's Latin and I don't speak Latin, I would assume that's a form of the world, as in monde in French. And simplex, I would assume. Could it really be a variation on simple? Simple world? Or could it be something entirely unrelated and it's just a complete coincidence that those words look and sound so similar? I say sound, I suppose I don't know they sound similar until I've looked up the pronunciation, but still. Single, simple, not complex. Looks that way, presumably from Latin. Single, simple, plain, uncompounded. It does! Oh, it doesn't mean world. It means cleanness, cleanliness, neatness, tidiness, elegance, finesse. So it means simple... Simple elegance, perhaps? Either simple elegance or simple cleanliness. Interesting. So, simplex munditis. Still to be neat, still to be dressed, as you were going to a feast, still to be powdered, still perfumed. Lady, it is to be presumed, thou art hid causes are not found. All is not sweet, all is not sound. Give me a look, give me a face, that makes simplicity a grace. Robes loosely flowing, hair is free, such sweet neglect more taketh me than all the adulteries of art. They strike mine eyes, but not my heart. So this is actually a expression of a quite a well known sentiment among men, which is that women often look more beautiful when they aren't made up in a when they present themselves in a more natural and therefore simple fashion. Hair freely flowing. Let me try again. Hair freely flowing, lack of makeup, simple clothes, etc. I mean, you see this expressed quite a lot these days, and I mean, clearly you see it throughout history. I suppose it's not that surprising. But in a way, it makes you think about how little has changed. Of course, the fallacy is assuming that women present themselves in a particular fashion for the benefit of men, or for, indeed, the attraction of another person, which, well, clearly sometimes that may be the case, but it often isn't. That's not the point of being made up, I would suggest. I'm having some problem assessing the... Oh, I think I see. I was going to say assessing the scansion, assessing the meter of the poem. I think it's iambic tetrameter, although with quite a few substitutions. Yeah, it looks that way. Lady, it is to be presumed, is a beautifully eloquent line in its context, but it doesn't fit well with the scansion, in my opinion. Though art's hid causes are not found. Oh, I see. Though art's hid causes are not found. I think that's suggesting though the reasons why you have made yourself up cannot be seen, all is not sweet, all is not sound. So that may suggest that part of the reason why they're making themselves up is to hide imperfections, such as imperfections in their skin, for example. It's a very, very nice poem for what it is. Again, I fear it may not be received all that well by modern audiences, but due to the implicit assumption that the way the subject of the poem is presenting herself is for the benefit of men, but I mean, a lot of that speaks more of modern fashions than anything else. You know, the idea that a poem of this subject might be ill-received, which I suspect it would be, as opposed to taken on its own terms. I think it's quite nice for what it is. Anyway. So we move on to the shadow. Follow a shadow, it still flies you. Seem to fly it, it will pursue. So court a mistress, she denies you. Let her alone, she will court you. Say, are not women truly then styled but the shadows of us men? At morn and even shades are longest, at noon they are or short or none. So men at weakest they are strongest, but grant us perfect, they're not known. Say, are not women truly then styled but the shadows of us men? Speaking of poems that wouldn't be well received by today's modern audiences, I don't fully follow the second stanza. I can see how it's trying to continue the imagery in the previous stanza, but I can't quite grasp the point it is making in the first 4 verses. I mean, the first 2, as I say, are just continuing the imagery. So I suppose it's the 3rd and 4th verses in the second stanza that I'm having trouble with. So men at weakest, they are strongest. I mean, this seems to be an allusion to men and women being equal and opposite, in a sense, or being natural counterparts, which is what the first stanza was trying to establish. But I'm not entirely clear on how that corresponds to the size of shadows changing. Oh, because the comparison would be between a human being and their shadow. That's the comparison being made. So a person's height doesn't change, but the size of their shadow does, and a person could be taller than their shadow or longer than it, depending upon time of day. But then it's talking about weakness and strength. So are we to assume that height is being, or relative height is being substituted for weakness and strength? But grant us perfect, they're not known. I don't follow that. Unless the suggestion is that for a perfect man there is no woman, which seems dubious, then I'm not sure what it's getting at. So I'll have to admit defeat on that bit specifically. I mean, it's a clever poem, I just don't think the sentiments would be well received today. Doesn't mean the observations that it's making about human life were wrong then, or even that they are wrong now necessarily. Just that it would be a unfashionable way to express these sentiments these days. What else do we have? Rhyming scheme. You pursue, you, then men. So A, B. Longest none, strongest known, then men. That's probably meant to be A, C, although none and known certainly don't rhyme in with modern pronunciation. But they what's the word? They do have consonants. So possibly that was only intended to be a half rhyme. Also looks like iambic tetrameter to me. I think that's about all I have to say about that one. Obviously, if anyone watching has anything they'd like to add, please leave a comment. But I think in a moment we'll move on to the Triumph. Right, where were we? The Triumph. See the chariot at hand here of love, wherein my lady rideth. Each that draws is a swan or a dove, and well the car love guideth. And she goes, all hearts do duty unto her beauty, and enamoured do wish so they might but enjoy such a sight, that they still were to run by her side, through sultry seas whither she would ride. Do but look on her eyes, they do light all that love's world compriseth. Do but look on her hair, it is bright as love's star when it riseth. Yes, threaten do, alas, I fear, as little as I hope from thee. I know thou canst not show nor bear more hatred than thou hast to me. My tender, first, and simple years thou didst abuse and then betray, since stirredst up jealousies and fears when all the causes were away. Then in a soil hast planted me, where breath the basest of thy fools, where envious arts professed be, and pride and ignorance the schools. Where nothing is examined, weighed, but as 'tis rumoured so believed, where every freedom is betrayed, and every goodness taxed or grieved. But what we're born for we must bear, our frail condition it is such, that what to all may happen here, if to chance to me I must not grutch. Else I may state should make much mistake, to harbour a divided thought from all my kind, that for my sake there should be a miracle be wrought. No, I do know what no, I do know that I was born to age, misfortune, sickness, grief, but I will bear these with that scorn as shall not need thy false relief. But who should less expect from you, in whom alone love lives again, but whom he is restored to men, and kept and bred and brought up true? His falling temples you have reared, the withered garlands ta'en away, his altars kept from that decay, that every envy wished and nature feared, and on them burned so chaste a flame, with so much loyalty's expense, as love to acquit such excellence is gone himself into your name. And you are he, the deity, to whom all lovers are designed, that would their better objects find, among which faithful troops am I, who as an offering at your shrine have sung this hymn, and here entreat one spark of your diviner heat to light upon a love of mine, which if it kindle not but scant appear, and that to shortest view, yet give me leave to adore in you what I in her am grieved to want. Interesting. I think we'll need to go through this one more slowly. Interesting structure. Looks like most of it is in iambic tetrameter, although I'm not convinced the first bit is. Yes, because but enjoy such a sight clearly isn't. What do we have? Love, dove, rideth, guideth, beauty, duty, might, sight, side, ride. So that's A, B, A, B, C, C, D, D, E, E. Then after that, it's just alternately rhymed. Like, bright, compriseth, riseth. Fear, bear, which are I rhymes. Thee, me, years, fears, betray away, and so on. So I would guess that the first stanza has no specific, or it has no established form. It's probably whatever the poet felt worked best. So, see the chariot at hand here of love, wherein my lady rideth. Each that draws is a swan or a dove, and well the car love guideth. And she goes, all hearts do duty unto her beauty, and enamoured do wish so they might but enjoy such a sight, that they still were to run by her side, through swords, through seas, whither she would ride. So, I may be misunderstanding, but aside from the imagery that's being presented here, it largely seems to be establishing the topic of this poem as love. And also establishing the fact that people will do a great deal for love. I suppose it also has the function of introducing the subject of the poem, although it only does so as presenting them as an ambiguous female figure. We don't really get any detail here because the detail is... what detail there is what detail there is elaborates on the imagery, not on the underlying message, I would suggest. Do but look on her eyes, they do light all that love's world compriseth. Do but look on her hair, it is bright as love's star when it riseth. I wonder what they mean by love's star. Are they referring to Venus? Which would be the evening star? Or had that association not yet been made? Because I know for a fact that quite a few of the celestial bodies in our solar system, Sol, were given Greek names in relatively recent times, as in from Victorian times onwards, as they were discovered, as opposed to having a Greek origin, whereas ancient Greek origin, as some of the celestial bodies were obviously named by the ancient Greeks. The sun, obviously, with the names Sol and what was the other one? It's not Phobos, that was one of the moons of Mars. Oh, this is annoying me. I'm gonna look this up quickly. Okay, Sol was the Roman sun god. That makes sense. What was his Greek equivalent? I'm sure it begins with PH. And it's not Phobos, but it's... Oh, Helios. Okay, who was I thinking of then? I'm sure there was one whose name we get... Oh! His mortal son Phaeton. Phaeton was, I think, who I was thinking of. Okay, so for the record, Helios is the Greek name for sun. Anyway, I'm making a bit of a mess of this, aren't I? What I'm trying to say is quite a few of the celestial bodies, particularly those that are more visible, like the sun, the moon, Mars, Jupiter, that's the Roman name, obviously, they were named in ancient Greek times by the Greeks, and I'm sure many other civilizations of antiquity, including the Romans, and we inherited a lot of those Greek and Roman names. But then, when astronomers started making new discoveries, from about Victorian times onwards, sometimes they would then pick mythological figures and from antiquity, and then they would name those bodies after them. So a good example of that would be Pluto. Pluto, of course, wasn't discovered till, what was it, like the early 1900s? When was Pluto discovered? Where does it say? Earliest recovery date. What's a precovery? In astronomy, precovery is the process of finding the image of an object in images or photographic plates, predating its discovery, typically for the purpose of calculating a more accurate orbit. Recovery is the process of finding the image of an object in images or photographic plates predating its discovery. Oh, I see. Okay. So the point they're making is that you might, for example, have an image of the night sky in great detail. Well, I say the night sky. You might be... nowadays, an image might come from a satellite that's orbiting Earth, but you have an image of of space, and you might have, and that might contain a lot of different celestial bodies, you know, potentially thousands or tens of thousands or what have you, and you might have an image of a particular celestial body there, but it not yet have been, but that at that point nobody knows about it, and so its significance isn't, its presence isn't noted at the time because nobody yet realised it exists, and it's just a dot among many dots. So where it says earliest recovery date, 1909, I think they mean that is the earliest known photograph of it. That is Pluto, but at the time they may not have realised it was even there. Unknown to Lowell, unknown to Lowell, his surveys had captured two faint images of Pluto on March 19 and April 7th, 1915, but they were not recognised for what they were. Okay, so yeah, I still haven't got an exact date for when Pluto was discovered, but it sounds like it was the very early 1900s. Point I'm making, Pluto was a Roman god, I want to say? Wasn't he the Roman god of the underworld? Yes, of course he was. The equivalent of Hades. And we should know that from our playthrough of the Forgotten City. So in the Roman pantheon, they had a god Pluto, but they presumably didn't have a celestial body associated with him, even though other celestial bodies, they would have had gods associated with them. And then much later on, when Pluto was discovered, that the then Edwardian scientists decided to name it after a mythological figure in keeping with other celestial bodies that had been known about since antiquity. So, what this long and rambling discourse on my part has been about is the fact that where it says, and that love's world, as love's star when it riseth, I'm wondering if that's the evening star, i.e. Venus, or if they hadn't yet made the association. Because, I mean, in a poem we read previously, they seem to be... the previous poet, I think it was associating Venus... the planet Venus with the god Diana. Oh, was it the previous? No, it was the same poet. Ben Jonson. Huh. That's interesting. Unsurprisingly, looking at Love's Star gives me absolutely nothing on Wikipedia, so I don't know. Anyway, let's carry on. Do but look on her eyes, they do light all that love's world compriseth. Do but look on her hair, it is bright as love's star when it riseth. So this is creating the conflation between the personification of love and the subject of this poem, the speaker's love interest, as well as I suppose there are divine connotations as well, aren't they? Even if the poem hasn't explicitly identified this personification of love specifically as a god, I would suggest the association with a star in the night sky, given how Greek and Roman mythology would have been received at the time, and also the suggestion that love has its own world. This all implies to me that they're giving an almost divine, that the speaker is exuding an almost divine reverence towards their love interest. Yes, threaten do, alas, I fear, as little as I hope from thee. I know thou canst not show nor bear more hatred than thou hast to me. Okay. This is a very interesting stanza because it immediately and unambiguously specifies that the love here is unrequited, and there hadn't been a suggestion of that up until this point. My tender first and simple years thou didst abuse and then betray, since stirredst up jealousies and fears when all the causes were away. Don't fully follow that. I understand that they're suggesting that they were abused by this individual. Exactly what sort of abuse is not entirely clear. It's the last verse that is confusing, where it says when all the causes were away. I'm not sure what they mean when the causes were away. Do they mean they didn't exist? In the sense that they were, where it says away, do they mean away in time? That, you know, they wouldn't be a problem until the future? It sounds to me that they're suggesting that in their formative years they suffered a great deal because they felt jealousy and fear towards the subject of the poem, their love interest, and specifically their love interests' love life. So this is sounding like this is an individual which they feel greatly amorous towards, to the point of feeling intense jealousy, but for whom the feeling isn't requited. Although it's interesting that they refer to them having abused and betrayed them. Do they mean that literally? That they abused and betrayed them and then they felt jealous? Or do they mean, or are they essentially victim blaming? Well, they're not quite a victim, are they? I mean, I wouldn't say that the subject of unrequited love is being abused just for the fact that someone feels love towards them. You could imagine circumstances where they then become a victim. So what I'm trying to get at is the fact that if person A has great amorous feelings towards person B, to the point that they feel jealous when person B pursues a love life, that may be part of the human condition, but I don't think anybody would blame person B for what they're doing if they've been clear about the fact that they don't have any interest romantically. They have no romantic interest towards person A. If they had been leading them on the entire time, that would be a different matter entirely. But assuming they haven't been. So the point I'm getting at is where it talks about thou didst abuse and then betray, is that just because they feel abused and betrayed because they're jealous? Or are they suggesting that they were abused and betrayed which led to jealousy, because those are very different things. And then it says when all the causes were away. Unfortunately, I don't quite follow that. I'm not sure if it's suggesting that the causes of the jealousy and the fears see, when they say it's away, that makes you think that it isn't immediate. Like, if one were to say something like, the causes of the economic downturn are away, or the causes of the economic downturn were away, what would you think they meant? See, if they were talking in the past tense, hence were, you might think that they mean they're in the distant future. Or possibly in the distant past. I mean, I think you would just interpret it temporally, wouldn't you? Temporally, sorry. I suppose what I'm driving at is intuitively, it seems to me that the word away would, in almost all circumstances, either refer to a distance in time or a distance in space, and without further information, it's not clear how this could mean space here. So one assumes time. So if it said when all the causes had gone away, that would be much clearer. That would mean that they were in the past. So that even if this is written in the past tense, before the point under discussion they had already left. I think that's, without further information, I think that's the most likely interpretation. So then, where it says, since stirredest up jealousies and fears when all the causes were away, I could be wrong, but considering everything that is presented here and everything that I've been trying to dissect just now, I think it's quite likely that what they're suggesting is that the speaker has amorous feelings towards the subject of the poem, and that subject of the poem in the speaker's youth had deliberately stirred up jealousies and fears in the speaker, even though the things that they were jealous about had already come to an end. So for example, if the subject of the poem had been in a relationship that was broken off, but then they allowed the speaker to carry on believing that the relationship was ongoing just for the purpose of making them jealous, and that then is the abuse and betrayal that is being spoken about. And whether they were or were not in a relationship at that point, it is not clear. That's the best I can think of for an explanation. So let's carry on reading and see if that actually makes sense. Then in a soil hast planted me, where breath the basest of thy fools, when envious arts professed be, and pride and ignorance the schools. So then in a soil hast planted me, where breath the basest of thy fools. I don't follow that. I sort of get the imagery of planting someone in the ground, which might indicate an inability to move in a literal or figurative sense, but the significance of that is lost on me. Then it says, where breath the basis of thy fools. I don't follow. Where envious arts professed be, and pride and ignorance the schools. Well, that's creating a link between pride and ignorance and envy. And professed is making me think that this might be related to professor. So the idea that the envious arts are in some way being presented as a serious, metaphorically speaking, a serious subject of academic inquiry, and pride and ignorance of schools. So essentially this all seems to be pointing towards the subject of the poem deliberately making the speaker feel greatly envious and playing on their pride and ignorance. Where nothing is examined, weighed, but as 'tis rumoured, so believed, where every freedom is betrayed, and every goodness taxed or grieved. This is a good stanza, even taken out of the context of the poem. So this is obviously a warning about taking things at face value, and trusting those that shouldn't be trusted, and how it can mislead you. But what we're born for we must bear, our frail condition it is such, that what to all may happen here, if 't chance to me I must not grudge. So I think that's basically saying that's life. If it was in my destiny to fall this fate, if that's what was in the stars for me, then I just have to bear it. That's the way it is. Grudge, to murmur, complain, to grudge. Else I may state, should much mistake, to harbour a divided thought, from all my kind, that for my sake there should be a miracle be wrought. Sorry. Else I my state should match mistake. Sorry. Else I my state should much mistake, to harbour a divided thought, from all my kind, that for my sake there should be a miracle be wrought. Which I don't fully follow. I mean, I can understand bits of it, but not but not all of it together as a whole. Else I my state should much mistake, to harbour a divided thought from all my kind. How do you harbour something from someone? Does that mean keeping something from them? That for my sake there should a miracle be wrought. No, I do not know that I was born to age, misfortune, sickness, grief. Sorry, no, I do know that I was born to age, misfortune, sickness, grief, but I will bear these with that scorn, as shall not need thy false relief. Okay, so I think the previous stanza was trying to say that if I don't stop myself from harbouring a grudge, then I would be in the mistaken belief that I'm entitled to a miracle to extricate me from this unpleasant situation. And then the following stanza goes on to say, but clearly that's not reasonable. That cannot be the case. And then it carries on with, but I will bear these with that scorn, as shall not need thy false relief. So now the speaker is talking about feeling scorn towards the individual who is their love interest. Which is an intense form of hatred. What does Wiktionary have to say on scorn? To feel or display contempt or disdain for something or somebody, to despise, to reject, turn down, to refuse to do something as beneath oneself, to scoff, to express contempt. So yes. I shall not need thy false relief. So, in other words, not only do I feel scornfully towards you, but in such a way as I will not be seeking false relief from you. So, in other words, not allowing oneself to... Well, first of all, it implies that the subject of the poem is at least making attempts towards so-called false relief. So, this is more and more sounding to me like this is a poem about being manipulated by somebody. That this person, for a while, will seem like they're very interested, and then they will go off them, and then they'll like them again, and then they'll go off them. And so this false relief, the relief would be from the sense of not being loved, and false relief because they don't think they do love them, they're just using them. But who should less expect from you, in whom alone love lives again, by whom he is restored to men, and kept and bred and brought up true. I don't know who's being referred to here, but who should less expect from you, in whom alone love lives again, by whom he is restored to men, and kept and bred and brought up true. Okay, so the subject is apparently love, although love was a lady previously. So I feel like there's something sophisticated going on here that I'm not following. I certainly get the sense that it's trying to suggest that in some way the subject of the poem is pivotal in causing men to feel true love again, although it's not entirely clear how that is brought about and to what degree it is intentional or incidental. So is it suggesting that unexpectedly she has now fallen properly in love with someone and that person loves them back? Or is it suggesting that once the penny drops and men realise they've been deceived by her, that only then are they able to feel true love again? When the wool falls from their eyes, as it were. His falling temples you have reared, the withered garlands ta'en away, his altars kept from that decay that envy wished and nature feared. I don't know what it means by his fallen temples you have reared, and I'm certainly not clear if it means temples of the head or temples as a poetic device, as in a reference by metaphor to an actual temple, as in a location of worship, or both. The withered garland ta'en away, that's certainly following the imagery, and garlands are associated with love. His altars kept from that decay that envy wished and nature feared. Kept from the decay that envy wished. So she's responsible for preventing the damage of envy, it would seem. And on them burned so chaste a flame, with so much loyalty's expense, as love to acquit such excellence is gone himself into your name. and on them burn so chaste a flame, with so much loyalty's expense, as love to acquit such excellence is gone himself into your name. Unless is gone himself into your name is a reference to getting married and her taking his surname, I am not sure. And you are he, the deity, to whom all lovers are designed, that would their better objects find, among which faithful troops am I, who as an offering at your shrine have sung this hymn, and here entreat, one spark of your diviner heat to light upon a love of mine, which if it kindle not, but scant appear, and that to shortest view, yet give me leave to adore in you, what I in her am grieved to want. Okay, I don't fully get this, but I think it is more complex than he's using a deity of love as a metaphor for the person he sees as his love interest. I think this is more like someone going to a temple of a god of love like Aphrodite and then leaving an offering and saying a hymn in the hope that the god will change the mind of their love interest to make them fall in love. I still think it seems like there's some allusion here to abuse and manipulation. So it's almost as if the victim of some form of romantic manipulation is making an offering at a temple to have that person actually fall in love with them properly. I could be wrong. That's just the best I can make sense of it. But to be honest, I could be well off. Well, if you have any strong opinions yourself, or just anything you'd like to add, please let me know in the comments. For now, I think we will move on to the riddles. So, I assume the last one we looked at must have been 149. Since that's where we appear to be. With so much art my temper limbs are wrought, that ere my frame was to perfection brought, I tried the nicest hand and deepest thought, but see what fury reigns in human breasts, else soon by man our virtuous things oppressed. I'm soon confined within a narrow space, where I have only room to show my face. There like a branded villain must appear, and large black letters on my visage wear, a heavy load my new form limbs sustain, and bear the girding thong or cruel chain. Is this really the last one we looked at? I don't recognise it. What's the previous one? Ye charming fair, whose growing fame is hurled swifter than lightning through the learned world, whose piercing wit unfolds deep mysteries, to whose search unveiled nature lies. I think this is more likely. Okay, we'll assume this is where we left off, and if we get to the next one and then I remember what the solution is, then we'll just carry on from there. Show to the world, ye lovely nymphs, my name, for you or none can sure unfold the same. In Paphian groves of old I fixed my reign, and little loves led on my wanton train, so sung the ancient bards, but now no more, I rest delighted with the Cyprian shore. Since barbarous Turks destroyed the blissful grove, usurped my realm and banished every love. From hence expulsed, on plumes of wreck I rise, and now enjoy a station in the skies, where I employ my utmost power and care to shed kind influence on the British fair. Nor is my care unfruitful, for where Thames glides o'er the yellow meads with silver streams, a nobler pathos rises to my sight, and softer scenes of exquisite delight. Their circling trees spread round their welcome shades, and smiling flowers glow through the checkered glades. On those I spread my most auspicious light, and like the moon am only seen by night. This is a big clue. On what time, Queen Regent of the skies, I reign, and usher in the bright celestial train, but frequent changes in my place are found, also a big clue. Sometimes I seem to wear a perfect round, then like a silver crescent formed I bear a monstern front, whom ancient tales declare to be my father. Now ye fair, I pray, to the expecting world my name display. And the solution to that, I believe, is the planet Venus. Specifically the planet Venus. Because although there were a lot of references to Aphrodite's temple on Cyprus, I think it was. There's also references to the night sky and moving through the sky, which I think was the clue that they are thinking that the solution to the riddle is specifically the planet Venus. Yes. So let's keep going, shall we? So, we move on to 149, which I don't think we've looked at before. With so much art, my tender limbs are wrought, that ere my frame was to perfection brought, I tried the nicest hand and deepest thought, but see what fury reigns in human breasts, how soon by man are virtuous things oppressed. I'm soon confined within a narrow space, where I have only room to show my face. There like a branded villain must appear, and large black letters on my visage wear. A heavy load my new formed limbs sustain, and bear the girding thong or cruel chain. As sharpest trials truest virtue show, by this oppression I more virtuous grow. To ease me of the burden I sustain, I labour hard, nor should I strive in vain. But men undo what I with pains have done, and make my task like Sisyphus' stone. Yet still some signal favour I enjoy, my frequent repetitions never cloy. I twice a day repeat the selfsame thing, yet I each moment fresh advices bring. This is sounding a lot like a clock, isn't it? Like twice a day repeat the selfsame thing, so a 12-hour clock. Make what you've heard 1,000 times amuse, and still the same dull story pass for news. To the devout I'm oft a friendly aid, I still assist in assignations made, send some to church and some to masquerade. Though hard I labour, yet my hands move slow. Oh, the labour that's being undone is presumably the unwinding of a spring. And though I never stir my feet, I go, men to my reckoning things of value trust. And though I never told 20, I can boast, no banker ever kept account more just. I don't know what told 20 could be a reference to. I mean, obviously a clock never reaches 20 o'clock, not a 12-hour clock anyway. But it sounds like it's also a reference to finance, which I'm not familiar with. I mean, there were 20 shillings to the pound, weren't there? Maybe it could be a reference to that somehow? But I'm speculating. Of what you spend, I always give the sum, but never tell you how much more's to come. Does sound like the solution is probably a clock then. So let's see if I'm right. So what was it? 149. So is it going to be a grandfather clock or something like that, or just a clock? Or am I wrong? Is it something completely different? It is indeed a clock. So let's keep going. From pregnant waters and from fertile earth, from nitrous air I claim my unknown birth. What do they mean by nitrous air? What would they have meant in the early 1800s by nitrous air? I mean, nowadays I would think high in nitrogen. Although I would also think it's a strange archaic expression. But I very much doubt they mean that. Another possibility is nitrous oxide. But that's laughing gas, isn't it? Let me double check to make sure I'm not making a fool out of myself. Nitrous oxide is laughing gas, isn't it? Yes. Which can be used as an anaesthetic, which they wouldn't have had yet, I'm pretty sure. I don't think anaesthetics came in till about mid-Victorian times, as far as I recall. Yeah, it's been used as an anaesthetic and analgesic since 1844. So yeah, they didn't have that yet. And I think that was one of the earlier ones discovered, along with chloroform. I don't know which one came first, but I think they were some of the earliest ones they discovered. So they're certainly not referring to that. I wonder what they mean by nitrous air. Well, should I just carry on for now? I'll start again since I was so near the beginning. From pregnant waters and from fertile earth, from nitrous air, I claim my unknown birth. Then rove about to persecute mankind, for to no town or country I'm confined. All the spacious land I travel o'er, and visit kings and princes rich and poor. But know I'm loved by few and feared by all, so prove unwelcome whosoever I call. Yet like a bold invader, none I fear, and savage-like, nor age nor sex I spare. For where I entrance gain, such havoc make. Where I entrance gain, such havoc make, the haughtiest humble and the stoutest quake. The mighty Whittaker, whose warlike fist ignoble slew his late antagonist. What's a Whittaker? A surname. Okay. It still sounds like it comes from a job. A Whittaker is a surname of English and Scottish origin, meaning the White Acre, also spelled Whittaker and Whittaker. Notable people with the surname include Dum-de-dum-de-dum. So I have no idea who they would be referring to in this, as it's probably pronounced Whittaker, I would guess. I mean, there probably was a famous person whose surname was Whittaker at this point. I just don't know who that is. An English politician, Charles Whittaker? I don't know why he would be associated with warlikeness though. Edward Whittaker, Royal Navy officer? Perhaps more likely. English politician again. English clergyman and topographer. Unlikely to be associated with warlikeness, I'd have thought, but certainly around the right time. Let's look up this Royal Navy officer. And what does it say? The mighty Whittaker, whose warlike fist ignoble slew his late antagonist. He served during the War of the Spanish Succession and is known for his role in the capture of Gibraltar and the Battle of Malaga, which I'm probably mispronouncing. No reference to fist. Rank of Admiral though, so I mean I know that's not quite the same as nobility, but it would have meant he was of enormous social significance. So I don't know. The mighty Whitaker, whose warlike fist ignoble slew his late antagonist, if once opposed to me, must quit the field, and all his glories to my power yield. And in their place his savage front would bear the ghastly marks of horrid pale despair. 'Tis for such coin I all my landlords pay, which usage makes a good old woman say, I'm so dire fiend, or evil spirit, sent from hell's dark legions for punishment. Goodness me. As it happens, I will be right back. I'll try not to be long. I'll also be thinking about this while I'm gone, and I'll leave it up. So, be right back. Sorry about that, I'm back now. Jenny asks, when was this book published? I'll have to check the exact date. I believe it was published in the very early 1800s. Jenny says, I guess Whittaker refers to someone who existed around the time when the book was published. Yes, I should think. Well, I suppose certainly not after. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it was someone who was around, 100, 200 years before, or possibly even more, if they were significant enough to still be being talked about. Like, for example, this Admiral Edward Whittaker we found. But to answer your question, when was this book published exactly? Uh, 1806. So, let's go back to where we were. So, obvious answers would be something along the line of... plague, famine, pestilence, death, that sort of thing. Also, when I first started reading this, before I got all the way down, I did consider the possibility that it might be... about the weather, because when it talked about moving from between town and country with impunity, I was thinking, oh, like clouds in the sky or something like that, but I don't think that's borne out from what follows. So let's go back. From pregnant waters and from fertile earth, from nitrous air, I claim my unknown birth. Based on the state of medical knowledge at the time, I wouldn't be surprised if this is just disease that it's talking about. Especially when it says pregnant waters. I wasn't entirely sure what they meant by pregnant waters, but I assumed it just meant full of life or something like that. But perhaps that is what they mean, but not in a positive sense. Carrying developing offspring within the body, that's obvious. Having numerous possibilities or implications, full of promise, abounding in ability, resources, etc. Wouldn't be that. Fertile, prolific, as in soil or earth, etc. That probably is what they mean then. Again, I'm not entirely sure what they mean by nitrous air. But when I look up nitrous, perhaps it'll have an archaic definition of what they would mean by nitrous. Now historic, pertaining or composed of niter, having the properties of niter, bitter. I'll look that up in a moment then. Of chemistry relating to or derived from nitrogen, especially in which the valence of the nitrogen is lower than that of a corresponding nitric species. Of relating to nitrous acid or its derivative, having a sharp odour like ammonia or nitric acid. That seems likely-ish. Why would they have associated a sharp odour with something like death, though? Not death, disease. Native sodium carbonate. Natron. So, waters that are teeming with life, earth that is teeming with life, or odorous air. Miasma. I claim my unknown birth. I am thinking this is probably disease then. Genesis still, there were loads of Whittakers who existed around the time when this book was published. Indeed. Pregnant waters, I guess it's an analogy that nurtures lives, e.g. a river. I think more or less that's probably what they mean. then rove about to persecute mankind. For to no town or country I'm confined, but all the spacious land I travel o'er, and visit kings and princes, rich and poor. But know I'm loved by few and feared by all, so prove unwelcome whosoever I call. Yet like a bold invader none I fear, and savage-like, nor age nor sex I spare. But where I entrance gain, such havoc make, the haughtiest humble and the stoutest quake. The mighty Whitaker, whose warlike fist ignoble slew his late antagonist. Of course, it could be a fictional figure. If once opposed to me, must quit the field, and all his glories to my power yield, and in their place his savage front would bear the ghastly marks of horrid pale despair. 'Tis with such coin I all my landlords pay, which used to make the good old women say, I'm so dire fiend or evil spirit sent from hell's dark regions for a punishment. So could this be a disfiguring illness specifically, something like the plague? The ghastly marks of horrid pale despair, which it then metaphorically refers to as being the coin by which it pays the landlords, that is, the people who own the land over which it travels. I think either disease in general, or more specifically something like the plague, seems likely. So let's see. And if you have your own guesses, by all means leave them in chat. So was this 150, wasn't it? The ague, which I'm pretty sure I'm mispronouncing. I do recognise that as an archaic word for a particular type of disease, but I don't know what it is. Apparently it's ague, an acute fever. An intermittent fever attended by cold and hot fits. Okay. Or malaria! Oh, malaria! That makes sense. And if they hadn't made the mosquito link yet, but they had made the link to the type of land that it was associated with, then that would actually all figure. Hold on, I'm just checking up ague in my physical dictionary to see if it can shed any additional light. Ague, malarial fever with cold, hot and sweating stages, shivering fit, quaking. Ague cake, enlargement of spleen or liver caused by ague, hence agued. If you Google Whitaker meaning, you find the result, the white acre. Would that have anything to do with the disease? White acre is thought to be the origin of the surname Whitaker. Whitaker is a corruption of Whiteacre, or at least that's what Wikipedia seemed to claim. Was it Wikipedia or Wiktionary? Wikipedia, I think. Wait. So then the references to making the stoutest quake really wasn't random at all. It's referring to the quaking that malaria causes, as would presumably the references to being pale. That's a good one. I know I didn't get it right, but that can't be... Obviously that's not a very good measure by which to judge how good they are. Now I understand it. That was a good one, I think. So, let's try another. 151. Our numbers small, yet smaller far our size. Yet from our front such noble structures rise. A strike each excuse me. A strike each ravished youth with glad surprise. 5 noble chiefs, prime lords of our train band, in triumph ride, decked with supreme command. A foreign hero of no spurious breed, with pompous train, submissive necks succeed. Our captain with gigantic size complete, of ancient lineage, and by title great. Proudly preeminent, surmounts the rest, advancing, hero-like, his angled crest. When marshalled in battalions we appear, this captain leads the van, the foreign youth the rear. His noble birth the ancient Grecians boast, though here debased in this inferior post. Without our chief we're abject, mean, forlorn, and by their help the greatest acts perform. Well disciplined, taught by the German sage, not soldier-like, in rank our foes engage. For most disranked, the more our force alarms, when powerful artifice our native charms, with strength redoubled, then attack each fort, a sword to fools, but to the brave support. Support to those by whom discreetly used, the dire reverse, if slighted or abused. As rambling brain, not fearing fortune's frown, strangers to some, to others were well known. Known well to you, unblemished nymphs, we stand, and daily wait submiss at your command, to kiss your rosy cheeks and lily hand. Okay, this is a clue. So this is something that young women at the time would have been using on a daily basis. But should our warlike fizz infuse surprise, withdraw in time those lovely gems your eyes. Such dazzling rays may scorch us now in view. Cease babbling muse, no more the theme pursue. Invite with speech each beauteous fair to name, these objects flowing from a fertile brain. Intriguing. There is a disease called Whittaker disease too. Goodness. And daily wait, submissed at your command, to kiss your rosy cheek and lily hand. I mean, it sounds like it's broadly speaking a tool, but a tool composed of several parts of varying sizes. A number small, yet smaller far our size, yet from our front such noble structures rise, that strike each ravished youth with glad surprise. What do they mean by ravished? To seize and carry away by violence, to snatch by force, to transport with joy, delight to ecstasy, to rape, to have vigorous sexual intercourse with. I mean, only the second one makes much sense here. I'll double check my physical dictionary. Ravish, carry off person, thing by force, now rare. Of death, circumstances, etc. take from life or from sight. Commit rape upon, violate. Whence ravisher, enrapture, charm, entrance, fill with delight, whence ravishing. How did that happen? How did those two meanings become entwined. Well, it's more than two meanings, but you know what I mean. Two clear families of meanings. The creature's thing seems to be everywhere. Terrain, various sizes. Is it something tangible? I suspect so, although I admit I hadn't considered the intangible. It does refer to touching the young lady's, was it hair and lily hand? Oh, cheek and lily hand. So that, I would think, makes it very likely that it's something tangible. Something small and women use often. It doesn't say specifically that only women use it, but it seems to be indicating that British women at the time would have used it. So, 5 noble chiefs, prime lords of our trained band, in triumph ride decked with supreme command, a foreign hero of no spurious breed. What's spurious again? I know this is one I've looked up before on stream. False, not authentic, not genuine. Extraneous, stray, not relevant or wanted. Illegitimate. So, of no spurious breed. So, the genuine article, as it were. With pompous train, submissive necks succeed. Our captain with our captain with gigantic size complete, of ancient lineage, by title great, proudly preeminent, surmounts the rest, advancing hero-like, his angled crest. When marshalled in battalions we appear, this captain leads the van, the foreign youth the year. The foreign youth the rear. His noble birth the ancient Grecians boast, the Greeks. Though here debased in this inferior post, without our chief we're abject, mean, forlorn, and by their help the greatest acts perform, well disciplined, taught by the German sage, not soldier-like, in rank our foes engage. For most disranked, the more our forces alarm, when powerful arts assist our native charms. With strength redoubled, then attack each fort, a sword to fools, but to the brave support. Support to those by whom discreetly used, the dire reverse, if slighted or abused. Thus rambling reign, not fearing fortune's frown. Strangers to some, to others we're well known to you, unblemished nymphs, we stand, and daily wait submiss at your hand. And daily wait submiss at your command, to kiss your rosy cheek and lily hand. But should our warlike fizz infuse surprise, withdrawn in time those lovely gems your eyes, such dazzling rays may scorch us now in view. Sees babbling muse no more the theme pursue. Invite with speed each beauteous fair to name, these objects flowing from a fertile brain. A number small, yet smaller far our size. Yes, indeed. I mean, it sounds like a set or something, doesn't it? A set of some sort of tool. Gems, something women use, a ring? No, gems here is being used as a metaphor for the eyes. I didn't fully follow that bit. But should our warlike fizz infuse surprise, withdraw in time those lovely gems your eyes. Withdraw in time. Oh, so it doesn't mean in time as in at your leisure. It means in time as in quickly enough. Withdraw quickly your eyes. But should at warlike fizz infuse surprise, quickly withdraw your eyes. So perhaps it's something that... Well, the fact that it refers to fizzing is interesting. I mean, it suggests it's something that is somewhat reactive. But then again, if it's a tool, then clearly it's not something that's used up, you would assume, or at least not used up quickly. Oh, James says, interesting, in my culture we use stars as an analogy for eyes. So do we, but gems as well. I really don't know. I may have to throw in the towel on this one. Yep, I think I'm going to have to give up on this one. I really don't know. So it's at 151. What could it be? A set of something, at least some of them are very small. And there's a reference to them fizzing, or at least causing something to fizz. A reference to some people being more familiar with them than others, but women being... British women at the time being particularly familiar with them. And it makes me wonder if it's some sort of makeup. But if it's makeup of what sort, and why is it fizzing? The alphabet... Okay, let's go back and read this carefully. Our numbers small, yet smaller far our size, yet from our front such noble structures rise. Oh, so things like books. And strike each ravaged youth with glad surprise. Oh, ravished as in enthralled. That makes sense. 5 noble chiefs, prime lords of our trained band, in triumph ride decked with supreme command. So that would be the vowels. A, E, I, O, and U. A foreign hero of no spurious breed, with pompous train, submissive necks succeed. The train being the order of the alphabet, I suppose, from A to Z. A captain with gigantic size complete, of ancient lineage, and by title great. Alpha, or A? Proudly preeminent, surmounts arrest, advancing hero-like his angled crest. Yes, that would be the letter A, particularly the capital A, with, as it calls it, an angled crest, like here. When marshalled in battalions we appear, the captain leads the van, the foreign youth the rear. So they're suggesting that the letter Z is foreign. Which, I mean... I don't know much about the history of the letter Z. I don't know if it was a later edition when that came about. Whose noble birth the ancient Grecians boast. So the Greeks. Well, I mean... That's possible, because of course we inherited the Roman alphabet. Which had parallels to the Greek alphabet. But obviously, in other ways they're very different. In most English-speaking countries, including Australia, Canada, India, Ireland, New Zealand and the United Kingdom, the letter's name is Z, reflecting its derivation from the Greek zeta. This dates to Latin, which borrowed Y and Z from Greek. Okay, this makes sense. Though here debased in this inferior post. Okay, so that suggests that zeta was more important in the Greek alphabet than the Z is in the Roman alphabet. Without our chief, we're abject, mean, forlorn, and by their help the greatest acts perform. Without our chief, we're abject, mean, forlorn, and by their help, without our chief, we're abject, mean, forlorn, and by their help the greatest acts perform. I don't follow that bit. I was thinking at first they were just going to list words without A in and then list words with A in. But abject has A in, so if A is the chief, I don't follow that bit. All discipline taught by the German sage, not soldier-like in rank our foes engage. Don't know what they mean by taught by the German sage. Presumably there was a significant German influence on the alphabet or language in some way. Maybe they're referring to the printing press, not sure. For most disranked, the more our force alarms, when powerful art assists our native charms. Okay, so I think that's just talking about the combination of the alphabet with art, as in artistic renderings of text, presumably, as adding extra power to a piece. With strength redoubled, then attack each four, a sword to fools, but to the brave support. I'm not sure why it would support the brave, but I can understand why the alphabet would be a problem for fools, as they put it. Support to those by whom discreetly used, the dire reverse if slighted or abused. That makes sense. If you use the alphabet wisely, as in language wisely, then it can be a great support, but it can also be your undoing. Thus rambling brain, not fearing fortune's frown, strangers to some, to others we're well known. Known well to you, unblemished nymphs, we stand, and daily wait, submiss at your command, to kiss your rosy cheek and lily hand. Lily hand, presumably because she would be holding a pen. Why the letters would kiss her cheek, I don't know. But should our warlike fizz infuse surprise, withdraw in time those lovely gems your eyes. So that's just looking away from some alarming text, presumably. Such dazzling rays may scorch us, now in view, sees babbling muse no more the fiend pursue. Invite with speech each beauteous fair to name, these objects flowing from a fertile brain. I wouldn't have guessed that. Certainly, if I had known that Z came from the Greek zeta specifically, and was presumably a later addition to the Latin alphabet, I might have stood a chance at getting it. I'm still not sure I would have done though. But without that information, I definitely couldn't have got it and didn't get it. It doesn't say that women are more familiar with the alphabet, Jenny. It says that women at this point in time in Britain would have been. And that makes sense because they're reading the book after all. In other words, they're literate. But it certainly doesn't say that women are more familiar with it than men. Anyway, I think that'll do for this week. So thank you for coming, everyone. I will be streaming again on Friday, which should be more Metal Gear Rising Revengeance. I will also be streaming on Saturday and Monday, the same thing. At least I intend it to be the same thing. We'll see. And then when we're back round to next Wednesday, that's going to be more poetry and riddles. I hope you enjoyed the stream, and I hope you all have a wonderful night. Good night.